So it's often said that Trollope didn't share the Victorian enthusiasm for Christmas, influenced by the German heritage of Prince Albert and Dickens, but true to form, he appreciated the commercial possibilities. In his autobiography, he wrote, "While I was writing The Way We Live Now, I was called upon by the proprietors of the Graphic for a Christmas story. I feel, with regard to literature, somewhat as I supposed an upholsterer, an undertaker feels when he is called upon to supply a funeral. He has to supply it, however distasteful it may be. It is his business, and he will starve if he neglects it. So I have felt that when anything in the shape of a novel was required, I was bound to produce it. Nothing can be more distasteful to me than to have to give relish of Christmas to what I write. I feel the humbug implied by the nature of the order. A Christmas story, in the proper sense, should be the ebullition of some mind anxious to instill others with a desire for Christmas religious thought or Christmas festivities, or better still, with Christmas charity." Such was the case with Dickens when he wrote his first two Christmas stories. But since that, sorry about that. Such was the case with Dickens when he wrote his first two Christmas stories. But since then, the things written annually, all of which have been fixed to Christmas, like Christmas toys to a Christmas tree, have had no real savour of Christmas about them. I had done two or three before. Alas, at this very moment, I have one to write, which I have promised to supply within 3 weeks of this time. Christmas stories were a feature of Victorian periodicals, portraying a romantic view of often rural celebrations, excepting A Christmas Carol, of course, fueled by references to a range of meats served in lavish portions: mutton, beef, goose and turkey, and various hot alcoholic punches and Christmas pudding. Incidentally, it's believed that the first reference to this term, rather than the older term of plum pudding, first appeared in Dr. Thorne. The practical arrangements, such as decorating churches, also features extensively. I learned quite a lot about these traditions from a recent seminar by our fellow literary society, the Charlotte M. Young Fellowship. A contemporary of Trollope and also a prolific writer, Young described Christmas celebrations in great detail in her works, complete with now fascinating details, such as when churches were decorated and when Christmas trees were taken down, as late as Candlemas in early February in some instances. Christmas stories are a tradition that continue to this day. Literary periodicals, such as the Times Literary Supplement and newspapers like the Times, still commission short stories from popular authors, and many Christmas anthologies are in print to this day. I actually rather like this Everyman Pocket Classics anthology, which actually contains Christmas at Thompson Hall. Although he clearly didn't relish the thoughts of Christmas fiction, Trollope did write 8 stories for the Christmas market. As well as Harry Heathcote of Gangoil, set in the Australian outback over Christmas, several chapters feature Christmas in Orley Farm, and there's a memorable passage in the last chronicle of Barset. He clearly enjoyed the eating, drinking, and merrymaking of the festive season. Trollope's Christmas festivities, organised at Waltham Cross in the 1860s, inspire the description of Christmas at Noningsby described in Orley Farm. Here, Mr. Graham speaks to Miss Staveley. "I could expend myself in Blindman's Buff," he said. "You shall then, after dinner, for of course you know that we all dine early. But Blindman's Buff at 3, with Snapdragon at 4:45, charades at 5, with wine and sweet cake at 6:30, is ponderous, and that's our mistake. The big turkey would be very good. Capital fun to see a turkey twice as big as it ought to be, but the big turkey and the mountain of beef and the pudding weighing 100 weight oppress one's spirits by their combined gravity, and then they impart a memory of indigestion, a halo, as it were, of apoplexy, even to the church services." The 8 Christmas stories appear as volume 1 of the Trollope Society's complete short stories, with a very thoughtful introduction by our vice president, Joanna Trollope. So Joanna says, "Trollope's view of Christmas and the attendant special stories was, if a touch pompous, both vigorous and honest," she says. His Christmas stories were intended, as all his stories were, to be examinations of those little lacerations of the spirit that he understood so well. The function of Christmas in these tales is to throw into fleeting high relief the dilemmas of his characters being tested against their own moral and social codes. Christmas, Trollope is saying, reminds us of our better selves and obliges us to obey them, but oh, the struggle. The stories are quite different, some more Christmassy than others, some better than others. And I have to say, I'm much like Dom, that I'm not really that much of a fan of Trollope's shorter fiction. I have to admit that I struggled to engage with some of them, but then that's the case for me with Trollope's shorter fiction, as I said before. Christmas at Thompson Hall, though, is a genuinely funny story featuring a thorny, evergreen family problem that exists to this day, and probably more so this Christmas. Should you go and stay with the in-laws over Christmas? Mr. Brown clearly thinks not, and he uses the excuse of a mild cold to delay the trip back to England from their home in France. His wife, desperate to get back home in time, inadvertently enters a fellow guest's room at a Paris hotel and slaps a mustard plaster on his chest, thinking it was her husband. According to my trusty 1899 copy of Inquire Within Upon Everything, this was a risky procedure. It quotes, "When applied, it should not be left on for too long, as it is apt to cause ulceration of the part. 10 to 30 minutes is quite long enough." So I think the moral of that is be careful where you put your mustard plasters. A somewhat farcical situation ensues, including a series of coincidental meetings at the Browns and the assaulted fellow guest en route to Thompson Hall. There the stranger is revealed as Mr. Jones, future brother-in-law of Mrs. Brown. The end of a genuinely hilarious tale that would liven up a chilly Boxing Day, even today. The Mistletoe Bough and Christmas Day at Kirkby Cottage are both love stories in a typically Trollopian vein, set at Christmas and features Trollope's staple storyline of young women agonising over misunderstandings with their admirers. All ends up well, though. The two generals and Catherine Carmichael, set in the American Civil War, Kentucky and New Zealand, respectively, cover challenging and not especially festive ground. In the two generals, brotherly love triumphs when two brothers fight on different sides in the American Civil War. And in Catherine Carmichael, we meet an orphaned young woman who marries a well-off sheep farmer, only to be treated badly whilst being secretly in love with his younger cousin. It does end up well, though. Not If I Know It, for me, is the weakest story in the collection. Actually, I had to read it twice to make any sense of it at all. It was actually Trollope's last completed piece of writing, and it involves a family misunderstanding over signing a legal document before Christmas. Again, everything's sorted out in the end. The Widow's Mite is a story of Christian charity set during the Lancashire cotton famine caused by the American Civil War, and probably went down well in the Good Words January 1863 number. Nora Field, engaged to an American, intends to donate the cost of her wedding outfit to starving workers and instead marry in everyday clothes. Again, it all works out well in the end. Finally, the two heroines of Plumplington deserves to be better known. It was published in the Christmas number of Good Words in the month of Trollope's death, and is in fact the real last chronicle of Barset. It lay forgotten until the 1950s, when it was published in this really lovely edition here, which I don't know if any of you have seen. It is set in Plumplington, which is situated at the bottom right of the new Barsetshire Tea Towel, and contains many references to the goings-on at Hiram's Hospital. We also get to meet young Harry Gresham, who is making up to the Dean's daughter at Barchester, and who we assume must be Frank Gresham's son. In a typically Trollopian plot, two young ladies from well-off, self-made families of different status, their fathers are a bank manager and a brewery manager, acquire hard-working admirers who are considered to be of a lower social status. Their fathers consider ridiculous solutions, such as leaving immediately for extended tours of France, but they eventually relent. and thanks to Dr. Freeborn, the vicar, and they all enjoy a jolly Christmas dinner together. So that's my introduction to Trollope and Christmas, and I hope that you've enjoyed that, and I hope that we can have a discussion now of these stories. Thank you.